Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is episode 7 of season 3. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. I've had the privilege to talk to misophones from all over the world over the past year, but today I have my first conversation with someone in South America. André is in Brazil, happens to be a podcast producer, and is of course suffering from misophonia. He's also a highly sensitive person, a term that has come up in some previous podcasts. We talk about that. We talk about cultural differences in Brazil and how they affect misophonia. We get really deep into how miso has scarred family relationships. And we also talk about self-triggers, which is something that André says is definitely a thing with him. Don't forget to check out the new website, misophoniapodcast.com, which has all the podcasts and soon some of the text chat interviews that I've been having with people, as well as transcripts whenever I can get them done. Let me know what you think in the contact form on the site or email hello@misophoniapodcast.com. I'll be launching a blog on the site too, and I'm looking for people to contribute articles. If you're interested, hit me up. And while we're on the topic of contacting me, you can follow on Instagram @misophoniapodcast or Twitter @misophoniashow. All right, let's get to this. It's one of the longer ones, but well worth it. Here's my conversation with André. Welcome, André. Welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So we were just talking that you've heard a number of episodes, so you know that. Curious, kind of where my guests are located. You wanna talk about that?
Sure. I am from São Paulo, Brazil. It's a huge city in southern Brazil. I was born and raised here and just never left. I'm in my mid 30s, and at this point, I don't even know if I can see myself living elsewhere.
Oh, great! Yeah, that seems like a great part of the world. I have not been to South America at all, but I'd love to hear about how it is from a sound perspective. But I'm curious, kind of like just kind of what you do there in Sao Paulo. I heard you
Right.
have a podcast, I believe, as well, right?
Yeah, I actually work on several different podcasts. I've been doing this for several years now. I had a major in communications in college, and then I got a degree in art and culture. So I've been trying to focus my work on being a music critic, and also I've worked on television, been a television producer, and I have done podcasts for, wow, I think my first podcast was in 2005, and then I didn't work in audio for a whole while, and then I started working again a few years ago, and now I'm working on 4 different podcasts.
Wow, that's awesome. So is that your full-time gig now? Is basically producing podcasts?
My full-time gig is having several different gigs. I just
Yeah,
jump from one to another
I'm a
all
big fan of
throughout the
that.
day. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that strategy. And it keeps you diversified, keeps the money coming from different sources, and at least from my
exactly.
perspective, and it keeps obviously keeps things interesting. But there are some financial and freedom benefits to that.
Yeah, I'm a
Um,
very curious person. I just love, learning and getting to know people and just being everywhere I can be and, doing several things at once. So I believe this is the right job for me.
yeah, no, that's very cool. That sounds really interesting.
I get to
Very,
talk to people
yeah,
for a living, I get to talk
yeah.
to very interesting people for a living. So,
Well, that's cool. And talking to people is obviously bringing it to misophonia. Talking to people can kind of be hit or miss. Do you kind of do you kind of basically vet people by, whether you think they're going to be problematic misophonia wise, or are you ever like get into a conversation with a fascinating person and it's just like a hellscape of sounds? Like, does that
okay,
ever happen?
so I think I could be talking to the most interesting person in the world, but then if I get triggered, I am triggered, you know?
Hmm.
So, yeah, that certainly is a challenge,
And
as it
you're
would be.
and this is kind of your livelihood. So how do you deal with that?
I just go with it. What can I do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like as I was telling you before we started recording, sometimes I'm editing a podcast and I have to hear over and over again the same sound, and it's torture. It really is torture, but I don't think there's anything else I can do. I just have to push through it. And I live by myself, so sometimes I get to, I don't know, yell, I get to
Yeah.
scream
Yeah,
sometimes.
this is vent, let it out. Yeah.
Yeah. But not when I'm, working at night. My neighbors wouldn't like that.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. You do what you gotta do. And I am certain, well, listening to your podcast, that is very certain how every job has, its challenges for someone with misophonia. And this is one of my challenges in my jobs when I'm talking to people and people trigger me with their sounds.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's hard to find a job that's gonna not be somewhat uh you know have some triggers.
Yeah.
And it's great that you're in a position that you love what you're doing so much that you can push through. That's a good place to
Yeah,
be.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. But yeah, like interviewing people, sometimes it's hard to keep a straight face when
Oh yeah. Oh, and are these face to face when we're allowed to be face to face, or are
they
they
used
video
to be.
video? Okay.
Most of them used to be face to face. Um, some of my interviews, because I also do interviews that I then write and publish. So some of them are by phone, but
Hmm.
many of them are face to face. So sometimes it's just really hard to keep a straight face.
Right.
But
And then
again,
there's the
I don't
visual
know.
triggers potentially.
Right, yeah. And those as well. And this is something that I feel like I gotta say right up front. I am very triggered by mouth noises,
Hmm.
but sometimes I feel like I can be even more triggered by nose noises.
Yeah, you mentioned that in a kind of when you first reached out to me, you were
Yeah,
asking me about that and wondering if anyone had mentioned that because you hadn't heard about that. Do you want to talk about that without, obviously getting deep into the descriptions of the trigger? Do you want to talk about that? Because it seems like
of
something
course.
that's not super common.
Uh, yeah, which makes it even worse, maybe. But the thing is, um, the very same way I feel when I'm triggered by a mouth noise, I get when I listen to a a noise from a nose, like when people are blowing their nose when they're sniffing. Sniffing is a nightmare for me. Um,
Well, sniffling, yeah. I mean, actually, sniffling is pretty. Yeah, that's a pretty common. I think that's the one for me as well. If it's repetitive, if it's over and over, if it's something that's kind of like one and done, then not so much. How about you?
I don't know. The thing is, I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like it's a cultural thing, especially from
Yeah.
certain areas in my country. Because this is one thing about Brazil. The country is too big, so the culture changes from one area to another
Right.
drastically. But I live in a huge city with people from everywhere, not only from the country, but from the world. And I feel like people from certain areas, oh, this is insane, but some people sniffle louder than others, you know?
Yeah. Well, it could be, yeah, it could be, or it could be just what they've observed from family members or, right, or
Exactly,
the community or
exactly.
something. And
Yeah.
yeah, I do feel like, yeah, and sometimes this could be my brain telling me this, but sometimes it seems like any of our triggers feel like they're just kind of being done casually or as a tick when, people should just cut it out. um, so
Yeah.
is the sniffling like, are they, do you feel like there's natural sniffling like if you have
Hmm.
an illness, but are you talking about this happening just kind of like casually as kind of part of the culture?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
really loud ones.
yeah.
I have observed how that happens. Some people just, I don't know, just to fill some
Fill the
blank.
time, fill the blank. Yeah,
Yeah,
yep, yep.
they will do that, and that really pisses me off. And it's the same reaction I get on my body than I get from watching someone eat, for instance, when they chew with their mouth open, obviously.
Right.
Um, It's a mixture of, I don't know, being disgusted and being angry and just wanting to flee,
Right. The
just
flight.
not wanting to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so are these ones are these triggers that you've had your entire life, like going back to you said you were born and raised
Hmm.
in that area. So are these
Hmm.
like lifetime triggers, or did you start with something more basic, like some family triggers, and they kind of expanded to this?
I really do fall into the cliche of like hitting puberty and then
Hmm.
being triggered by family first,
Yep.
and then others. Is my dog being too loud? I can
Oh
say
no,
it
no, that's
again.
fine. That's fine. It'll be under
Okay.
the brown noise. Yeah.
Okay. So I do remember being about 12 and then not standing. First, it was my family, and I am pretty sure nothing was ever their fault. But then again, at the same time, I was very triggered and I didn't know how to communicate that.
Hmm.
But then it was closely followed by like schoolmates.
Oh yeah.
And it's been following me around ever since for over 20 years now.
Yeah, right. And it's just been kind of growing and growing as it kind of does with
Oh,
many of us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I noticed that until I listened to the podcast. I was like, yeah, it's getting worse. I do
Yeah.
believe it's getting worse. And maybe, I don't know, maybe this is just an assumption, just a possibility. Maybe it's because now I live by myself and I get to be sheltered most of the time, Then when I'm out in the world, when I'm out with people, I maybe, I don't know, these words are quote unquote louder because I'm not used to
Yeah.
them anymore.
Right. I mean, I've talked about that. I mean, I've discussed it on a number of shows where we try to tell people, hey, it gets better. You have more control over your environment as you get older. But yeah, it is a double-edged sword because you can
Yeah,
totally protect yourself, and then you go out and it's like, who are these yeah, mofos just kind of being as loud as
exactly.
um, yeah, just being disgusting. So yeah, that's an
And
interesting dichotomy, interesting kind of paradox there.
yeah, and I feel like for most of my life, or I don't know, for most of my teenage years when it first started, I feel like I could hide behind a wall of just good manners, you know? Why
Yep.
you why are you making noises with your mouth? Or are you making noises with your nose? Like this is not good manners. And I could
Hmm.
hide behind that. Um, and it wasn't until it's fairly recent that I came to the term misophonia, to this,
Hmm.
um, how can I say this? To learn more about it and just learn that this is a real thing. It was not just me being weird or me being difficult, as I assumed my whole life,
Right.
that I was a difficult person, that I was just just different, but in a bad way, a negative
D
way.
Yeah, and how did you did that lead to any kind of like that like the shame and guilt that we have about like why are we doing this? Like why are we kind of we're angry, but why are we the years of being angry at other people for something that seems like it's not a real thing can kind of lead to a lot of that shame and guilt. Did you feel that as well, or did you just I don't know, somehow avoid that baggage?
100%. I
Yeah.
100% felt that because also on top of everything, I'm a highly sensitive person,
Yeah, I want to
which
get into that later too, but yeah.
yeah, which also is something that is somewhat recent in my life, the realization of it. But yeah, so I was not well equipped to handle my misophonia. And because, well, who's well equipped when you're 12
You're
to
right,
do
right.
that? But then on top of that, I would react negatively to my surroundings, and then I would get, I don't know, my surroundings would be negative towards me back. And
Yeah.
then that would create a lot of shame and a lot of resentment, um, even, yeah, anger.
Right. So you're talking about like with family members and friends and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was it affecting kind of your social circles in school or outside of school? Like were you kind of maybe a loner, or maybe you had friends, but they started to kind of like, split off as you started to get triggered? Like, I'm just curious how social, your friend circle was as you were growing up.
Mm-hmm. I'm a very sociable person. I am very introspective in how I process my feelings and how I process everything, but I am very outgoing. So I've always had lots of friends.
Right.
And like I said, I always thought I was the problem, quote unquote, you know? So um, I just I just had to take everything in, you know?
So were you just bottling everything up?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Like, what can I do? This is how people are,
Right.
and there's something wrong with me if I cannot just tolerate them, you know?
But you said, I think, did you say that you were lashing out at certain times as well? Like did you have moments of anger?
Yeah, especially I think when I was very young, when I was like 13, I would
Okay.
just tell my family like, "Hey, you taught me manners. Why can't you just have manners, you know?"
Gotcha. Yeah.
But then that's something I could never tell my friends, for instance. And
Yeah, they would
but then
punch you in the face.
again,
Yeah.
I think this is a cultural thing. This is a cultural difference I get from listening to people from different countries in your podcasts, because I feel like in Brazil, the way people are very sensitive in Brazil. So if I come up to you and I go like, "Hey, what you're doing is triggering. Is it okay if you don't do it?" The person will hear me saying, "Hey, you are doing something that is bad for me. Like you are a bad person for me."
Right.
So I could never tell anyone to not do something because that bothers me, you know?
I think that's tricky everywhere. I mean, I
Hmm.
think that's come up here as well, where people are like, "Well, how do we frame it in a way that doesn't sound accusatory? That sounds more like I have this." It's more like, "Well, I have this condition, and it happens to be triggered by the thing that you're doing." Is kind of how people seem to be
Hmm.
more successful in framing it. Because yeah, I think in many cultures, if you just tell people, "Hey, you're hurting me," they will they will not react in a good way if it's just a sound.
Yeah, people get defensive, right? Like,
Right.
no, this is nothing. I'm not doing anything. What are you
Yeah,
saying?
exactly. I'm not, yeah, you're crazy.
Exactly.
Um, so I'm curious. Oh yeah, I'd like to kind of talk about HSP again. A
HSP.
highly sensitive person. So you said you just kind of realized that recently. How did that? Was that? Is that? Why don't you define that and kind of talk about how that relates or doesn't relate to misophonia?
Yeah, of course. Being a highly sensitive person means that you actually feel more. Um, your feelings are usually stronger. The way you relate to your surroundings is just more intense. I
Hmm.
believe she's called Samantha, your guest, who was also an HSP a while
Yeah.
ago.
Hmm.
She explained it beautifully, and I recommend everyone to listen to that episode. So I last year I was struggling with several different things, mostly because of stress, mostly because of anxiety, and I ended up going to a psychiatrist who then recommended me to go to a psychologist, and then all throughout that journey, the term HSP came up. And then I just read more about it, I researched more about it, and I took the test. And if I'm not mistaken, the test has 27 questions. And if you score, like they're all like true or false. And then if you say
Yeah.
true to over, I don't know, I think 15 or 19, you're likely a highly sensitive person. I scored 23. So yeah,
Yeah.
I truly am a highly sensitive person, and I never even knew that existed. So
Where do you think that comes from? I mean, have you thought about? And you said you're very introspective. I'm curious. I'm sure you must have maybe thought about whether you were always like that, or whether that developed at some point.
Yeah, well, what research shows today is that it's something that's just how your brain is wired, sort of like misophonia.
Yeah.
So that's just how your brain is wired. You were kind of born with it. So it just comes from my DNA.
Yeah. And did you ever think about it as being the reason for your misophonia? I'm curious if you ever thought about them together.
I have, but I discovered misophonia first.
Mm.
So I just feel like they go hand in hand, and that combo is just very destructive.
Yeah,
You
I'm
know?
wondering, do they kind of reinforce each other and just make things worse?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't assume that everyone who is a highly sensitive person has misophonia, especially because 20% of the population is highly sensitive. So
Oh,
that's a huge
really?
number. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
huge
that's
number.
massive.
And I don't know the percentage for misophonia, but I know it's much, much lower.
Yeah. Do you do anything for the I mean, what do you do for a highly sensitive? Is it just the way, is it just something you have to deal with, or do people take medication or anything, or therapies? I'm just curious
There are
if it's
several.
considered like a if it's considered a mental health issue, or if it's just a way to describe yourself. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
don't
much
believe
about
it
it, so I'm going
is.
to ask dumb questions.
No, no, no. These are not dumb. I'm just feeling dumb because I don't know how to answer them. But what I know is that Dr. Elaine Aron, the woman who came up with the term highly sensitive person, she describes it as a personality trait.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but yeah, it's
Not as much of a disorder as more of
no,
a
it's not. It's not a
personality trait.
condition. It's not a
Yeah, yeah,
condition.
a trait that can definitely be tough sometimes. It sounds like.
Yeah, it has its perks. Like that's that's the way
Yeah.
psychologists are always trying to tell us, like, oh, this is a superpower because you
Mm.
have more empathy towards people and you enjoy art more. And I'm like, okay, but at the same time, when someone yells at me, I just completely shut down, you know?
Yeah. So what do you feel when that? Like, yeah, I'm curious. Like, a couple of examples of what you feel. If somebody yells at me, I want to punch. Well, I don't want to do anything about it, but I kind of want to. They don't. I don't necessarily feel sad. Well, unless it's something I did. Yeah. I guess I'll shut up. Yeah, I'm curious how do you feel in certain situations with
So yeah, I
with
understand
this,
what you're saying, and I would never judge you for wanting to punch someone because some people just deserve to be punched.
right?
However, what I experienced is that this has a lot to do with misophonia. At the same time, I don't know. They do go hand in hand. Um, I mean, they do go hand in hand. Sorry.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, what was I gonna say? Right. Being a highly sensitive person from birth means that the way my brain developed is that it's always alert. It's always just very ready to fight
Yeah.
danger, any sort of danger, and even emotional danger. So my mom has lots of stories of me just bursting out crying when I was little, even from like watching cartoons because someone got hit by another
Hmm. Hmm.
character, and I would just have this weird empathy towards, cartoon characters, going like, oh, they didn't deserve to get punched. That's not the guy who deserves to get punched, you know? So I would just cry watching cartoons that were made to make you laugh. Um, but yeah, I'm sorry. I think I lost track of the question. What were you asking? What was the original question?
But yeah, I was just asking like how does HSP feel?
Right, right, right.
But
You were
what
asking
I
me
was
examples.
yeah, but what you started to describe about being alert all the time and being extra, that sounds very much like uh, part of a description of misophonia. is,
Exactly.
your brain, your hearing is so ready to, especially when you're stressed out, so ready to attack that you are kind of how you're highly sensitive in that regard. Um,
Yeah. And um, I wish I could explain this better, but if anyone is into neuroscience, I am. This is a fun read, but when you research how your brain operates under danger and how the amygdala
mhm,
reacts to danger, I feel like being a highly sensitive person, that is just enhanced, you know?
right,
And that is why so many people who are HSP are prone to depression and anxiety because we're
right,
always very alert and we're always just fighting back.
right. Do you feel when you're HSP, do you also feel the positives in a more intense way as well? Like
I think so.
laughing, happiness, and suppose
Yeah.
the flip side is also true.
Yeah, I think it was Samantha again, the record from
Hmm.
sorry, the guest from the second season. She said that the world is just louder, but I feel like the world is also like more colorful and it has, I don't know, more intense smells and tastes. I don't know. The thing is, I usually am the person enjoying things the most.
Okay.
Like if I go, I don't know, we go out to dinner, like in a group of friends, and I'm always the one who is the most excited about the food, and then we
Ah,
go we go to a music concert and I am the one who is enjoying the music more, the most.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's how yeah, that's the positive, I guess. But I tend to lose track of those because unfortunately, that's something I have to work on, but I do lose track of those because the negatives are just more intense sometimes.
Well, I was gonna say if you're going you're going, I'm picturing you going out to dinner, great restaurant. You're just loving the food, can't get enough of the food. So happy you're on top of the world, and then you're triggered by somebody.
Exactly.
And
I
so
will.
what happens then? Is it almost, I mean, I'm thinking, the term bipolar comes to mind. I'm wondering, is that completely different? Just, being on top of the world at one point and then being at the depths of depression at another. Is it kind of it's different than that. It sounds like one's a trait
Hmm.
where you're just within normal emotions. You're not
Hmm.
turning narcissistic or anything. You're
Hmm.
just feeling them a little bit more strongly. That's kind of what we're talking about here, right? With your
Yeah.
HSP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. And then again, this is my experience, and I understand that everyone will have their different experience. But there was another guest from another episode. I will never remember his name, but he said something that made me laugh out loud because I had never put that into these words, but I relate to it 100%. He said he keeps track of how all his friends eat. And I was
Right.
like, yeah, that is exactly me. I can describe to you how every one of my friends eat. And I feel like a jerk when I say that, but that's true.
So does that then affect, like, you're a super social person and you go out to eat a lot, you have lots of friends. Do you kind of like do you kind of decide when you're going out with somebody who you're going to invite, or how does it tactically work for you? You keep track of that, but like how does that affect your day to day
Oh
before you get
man.
triggered?
I don't know. I think,
Or you just do what you do and then you get triggered and it's just like
yeah, I
then
think
it's kind
that's
of
the most likely
Groundhog's Day just
scenario.
starts over again, maybe the next day kind of resets.
Yeah,
And
but then again, I might have, stronger bonds with people who will not trigger me as often.
gotcha. Okay, this is what I wanted to hear. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember friends who triggered me a lot, and I'm not close to them anymore. So maybe
Yeah.
there's a relation there. I don't know. And when I think of the friends I have now, they again, maybe I'm a jerk to say that, but these friends they
No,
have,
do
good
it.
manners.
Right.
I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything triggering, even not knowing that if they did do that, that would trigger me, you know?
Yeah, and so I think again, I was looking back in our notes, and I think you said something like you weren't sure how this was going to work because you had never talked to anybody about misophonia. Have you talked to your friends about misophonia?
No, this is actually the first conversation I have about it. I did talk about it with the psychiatrist and the psychologist I mentioned,
Yeah.
and they both were just like, uh-huh, yeah, you do have that. Like as soon as I
Oh,
mentioned
okay, okay.
and I
Not
listed,
dismissive, but as in yes, it's more like yes, you definitely have it. They
oh,
already
they
knew
just
about
validated
misophonia.
it. They
Okay, okay.
validated it. They were like, yeah, that's you. That's what you have. When I started
Is that common in
listing.
Brazil that there is that aware level of awareness amongst medical professionals and therapists? Because
Not at
that's not that
all. I
common
think
here.
I
Okay.
just got really lucky. I just got
Okay.
really lucky,
You
honestly.
had the two psychiatrists that know about misophonia in the whole country happen to be
Maybe because the
nurse.
psychiatrist really knew what it was, but the psychologist, as soon as I mentioned misophonia, she was like, "Oh, like mouth noises." She was listing examples back to me, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
all of those. I have all of those." So she really knew. But then I researched. That was not long ago, like a couple months ago. For some reason, I researched like psychologists in my area. Again, I live in a city where 20 million people live,
Yeah,
so this
that's
is a
huge.
lot of
Yeah.
people. So I go like psychologists in São Paulo who specialize in misophonia, and one came up.
Okay. Okay.
One came up. So this is not common here. Like if I feel
Right.
like if I say misophonia, my friends are well educated. Most of them are very well educated.
Some of
Um,
them are dumb, but yeah.
some of them are dumb. Some of them are on my level, which is dumb. But I feel like if I say misophonia to them, most of them just will not know what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, I doubt that misophonia is indexed because it's not that well known. It's indexed in like Google so that it'll
Hmm.
catch everybody who's heard of misophonia. I'm sure there's more than one that knows about it, probably, or maybe I could be wrong.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well,
20 million
he's
people. I mean,
not who knows about it, but he specializes in it. Like he lists misophonia as one of his specialties.
oh, really? Your psychologist does?
Not my psychologist, sorry. This
Oh, okay.
one that I
Oh,
researched,
this
the
one.
one that I
Gotcha,
found
gotcha.
on
Okay.
Google. My
Yeah,
psychologist, she specializes in lots of different things. She
yeah,
knew of misophonia,
yeah.
but she never listed that as a specialty of hers.
So I'm curious, what did she have to say then? Did she have any insights that were useful?
Not really, because we didn't really. She did ask me how that affected my relationships,
Hmm.
and the truth is not much. Like what I
Hmm.
just told you, like I just
Yeah,
push through it. I just push through a dinner.
yeah,
If you have a cold, I'll just push through it, with your sniffling.
yeah.
Um,
What about the psychiatrist? You said the psychiatrist also knew about
yeah.
misophonia, or okay,
Yeah, but she yeah, our conversation was pretty much she telling me to go find a psychologist because
okay,
all my the
other
sources of
stuff.
everything I was going
Yeah,
through, yeah, they were they had to be dealt with a psychologist instead of a
okay,
psychiatrist, which
gotcha.
is a relief in a way. Like I don't,
Yeah,
you know.
right, right. You want to be just taking pills and stuff to
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. So, yeah, so you don't, so then what do you do with your friends then when they're triggering you? Is it just kind of giving them the glare or trying to, negotiate some basic manners with them, or do you just literally just kind of silently push through it, bottling everything up?
The glare is very spontaneous sometimes,
Yeah. Oh
very
yeah.
spontaneous, and maybe it. became stronger when I started living by myself. But I feel like sometimes the way I react is just a bit too spontaneous. I cannot
Yeah.
keep my cool sometimes. And I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like, I don't know, um, like my whole body sometimes would just react, and it
Yeah.
shows. But most of the time, I can just mask it, you know.
Yeah. Do your friends pick up on it?
Rarely. And then I
Okay.
just come up
Okay.
with an excuse.
Are they going to listen to this show? Or are you just
I've
going to?
been I spent the last few days debating with myself
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not
about
gonna. I don't know
that.
your friends. I'm like, yeah. I'm just curious what you're thinking about that,
Hey, I don't
or
know.
if you had thought about that. I'm glad you're here. I'm just curious. If,
No, yeah, I've been debating that thoroughly, and I
yeah,
still
because
have
you're not
not
the
come to a
first person.
conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the first person who's come on and said this is the first time I've talked about it. I actually have never asked like, hey, are you planning to kind of like tell people? But yeah. So it's just a question I think I'm curious about. It's yeah. I mean, I think it'd be great if, I mean, it'd be great if it happens that you're, friends here and they're empathic, and then, I mean, wouldn't that be great if they suddenly are more accommodating?
Yeah, you know
But
what I worry about? Knowing my closest friends, I worry
hmm
that they would get too worried,
oh, gotcha,
that
and
they would
yeah,
be too self-conscious around me. And
yeah,
that is also something, I don't know, I assume people will relate to this. It's a weird position where I I
it's like
really don't want you
eggshells.
to change your behavior around
Yeah,
me, but at the same time, I really wish you would behave differently.
yeah, yeah. There was somebody who came on recently who said that is like, uh, yeah, I think it was, I think it was Gilles who's in, right. He's in, I think he's in London or Sweden or somewhere in Europe, but he said, a former partner of his, like she would start to like be too accommodating, and that would kind of trigger him because he was just so aware of it, and somehow it would bother him as well. I don't know if it was technically misophonia, but she'd
Yeah.
kind of be walking on eggshells, and he would just yeah,
I think
it,
for
it
me, that
wasn't the
would
greatest.
trigger guilt. I would
Yeah, right,
just
right,
feel
yeah.
what I felt growing up, which is shame, which is guilt, which is why am I asking this of you, you know?
How's your relationship with your family now?
Hmm.
Is it damaged from that still, or
It's
it's just
scarred,
kind of
definitely scarred.
okay?
My father has brought it up a few times, like I cannot be myself around you.
Okay, recently, or like it was that a long time ago?
The last time was like 8 years ago.
So yeah, eight years ago, he brought that up. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things where both parts are just hurt, by the nature
Yeah.
of it, by the very nature of
Right.
it. It's not
Right.
like one is guilty and the other one is not. It's just the way things are, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Again, I don't want you to change your behavior because of me, but I really don't want you to behave the way you are behaving right now.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
it's a real challenge.
So then you haven't you. So how did? So if you're saying you haven't talked to anybody about it, so you haven't really talked to your parents about it, but it's just something that was always acknowledged. That sounds were
Yeah.
bothering. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when I was 12 or 13.
I mean, I can very much relate to what you're talking about here, especially with
Yeah.
this
I feel like
this context.
when you're 13, you're developing everything. You're developing your confidence. You're developing the way you talk to people. You're developing,
Hmm.
it's like you do that when you're a toddler. You learn how to talk, you learn how to walk. And then again, when you're in your early teens, you're sort of like redeveloping all your skills at once. And then I felt, maybe the word is entitled, to come up to my parents and go like, hey, the manners you taught me, you're not putting to use. So
Gotcha.
why you're not doing that? Why are you chewing with your mouth open? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And not knowing it would be hurtful.
Right.
Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, again, and then they would just be very hurt. They would just tell me how inconsiderate I was. And oh, this is something I was thinking of the other day. It was something my mother told me. I don't remember how old I was. Maybe I was 14. Again, it was in my early teens. I don't know what it was that I reacted to, if she was eating or if she was, I don't know, sniffling, but she said, "You think you're better than everyone else."
Mm,
And I could not communicate back to her that it was exactly the opposite. I've always felt
mm.
inferior because of it, you know?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Just again, being highly sensitive and having misophonia combined, not knowing these things were even a thing, I always just felt inferior. I always just felt too different. And again, in a negative way.
Right.
So, and I'm, this maybe plays a part in everything, but I'm the oldest child. I have a younger sister who doesn't have any of that. So there was always the comparison, like, why are you difficult and your sister's not? You know?
Have you talked to your sister at all about any of this? Even the
No,
HSP? Yeah.
no, and we're not that close.
Mm-hmm.
So we get
Do you
along.
think,
We're just not, close.
and were
So
these also a factor with your sister as well?
you mean that she was
Yeah,
triggering
oh,
me?
yeah, yeah. Well, just yeah. I mean, the same kind of issues that you had with your parents
Oh,
and
absolutely.
triggers. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and also grandparents, also uncles, also cousins,
Okay, oh, gotcha. Everybody,
and
yeah,
again, also schoolmates
gotcha.
and neighbors, and the list goes on.
Yeah,
Pretty
right,
much
right, right,
everyone I know.
right. But it sounds like so. But it sounds like your the relationships with your family were more scarred than say all your friends that you're going to dinner with now.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially because I feel like there's no arguing there. Again, when you're 13 and you're learning how to communicate yourself to the world,
Yeah,
you know there are
gotcha.
things you cannot tell your friends, but then you cannot say to your friends, but then you can say that to your parents.
Gotcha. So the
You
scarring
know?
is could because that yeah you were reacting in ways that were normal for a for someone you know at that age
Yeah,
with their family,
exactly.
but you bottled everything up with your friends, and that's why maybe they're it's easier because you haven't really or just haven't brought it up with them. It's easier for the relationship,
Yeah,
but
it's
tougher on your brain.
your parents are always your parents, and you can lose
Right.
your friends by saying
Right.
something back to them.
Right.
I think that plays a huge part in that, especially when you're in your early teens, you know.
So you've probably naturally selected. You have a lot of friends, but you've probably naturally selected ones that obviously that you're able to spend time with them
Yeah.
and not have it go over the line to kind of ruining it.
Yeah, but then again, I do feel very drained if I socialize for
Yeah.
too long. And
Yeah.
maybe misophonia has a part in that. Maybe it's just the way I am because I'm introspective. Maybe it's because I'm highly sensitive. I don't know. But maybe it's also because of misophonia. Like I will go have dinner with you, and then I will just push through all the triggers, but then my energy level will be so low by the end of the night, you know? I
I
just
always thought it
have
was
to
like
rush home.
attention span, but I think that's also part of it too. Is yeah, just the energy level going down from triggers.
Exactly. And I do have a story to tell
Yeah.
that happened when I was 16, and I think that that tells a lot about how I have handled misophonia my whole life. You know, in school, when kids pair up and they push their desks close to one another to
Yeah.
work on something, we were doing that. I was 16, and this classmate of mine, she just came to my desk with her desk, and she had like a cold or something, so she started to sniffle, and I was tremendously triggered. But my desk was
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what's the word? It was up against the
Mm,
wall. So she came from the other side, and I actually felt cornered. So I couldn't comprehensive narrative to just say, oh yeah, he's just too stressed from finals.
right.
But no, it was I could not handle what was going on, and then my body was just I felt like I was melting. I felt like I was I don't know. And I
Yeah, I
didn't
mean,
have half the language I have now to explain it. So I was
right.
just going like, I don't feel well. I don't feel well. I feel dizzy. I feel like I was going to faint. And then people were like, "Oh yeah, you're getting more and more pale." So the
Yeah,
the the school called my parents, and I was sent home.
gotcha. And did you recover pretty quickly? Like, just go get some quiet time and rest, and you were
Yeah, I
fine?
took a nap,
Yeah.
and it was it.
Perfect. Perfect. Love the nap. No one
Yeah.
triggers you when you're napping.
Exactly. Except I'm a very light sleeper, but that's
Oh
that's another
yeah,
thing, I guess.
that's another. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, I was never the kid who claimed to be sick to get out of things. So
Hmm.
again, I did feel something, and I was very pale, as people were pointing out. So no one questioned it, and I was just sent home, and my family was like, "This is weird. What do you have?" And I said, "I don't know. I just." I just feel this way. And then everyone agreed that I was just stressed. And then I took a nap and everything was back to normal.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
No one doubted
Interesting.
me and no one questioned what was going on. And everyone was just, yeah, satisfied with that narrative.
Yeah.
But I never
Yeah.
told anyone this before. That was the real story that happened
Wow.
20 years ago. Yeah.
Well, Andre, we have that girl right here with us tonight. No, just kidding. That'd be quite a podcast moment.
I don't even
Yeah,
know if she speaks
that's
English, so that would be
yeah.
really interesting. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I wonder. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have any memories like that. I'm gonna think about that now after we hang up here. But yeah, when you don't have that language, I mean, I've mentioned this before. It probably sounds so stupid now, but I could never stand for my first job. Just could never stand eating with my coworkers, and
Hmm.
I always thought that I was just bored by them, which probably was in many situations. But then it extended to jobs where I really like my coworkers. Um, and I feel like those that's I was probably manifesting my miso in some way, just kind of wanting to eat by myself
Oh, I
from a
completely understand.
relatively early age, internships in high school around that time that you were kind of experiencing
Yeah.
your vertigo and whatnot. So
Yeah, when I was getting my degree, we had classes on Saturdays, like the whole day. So we would do like potlucks, and
uh
everyone would include me, and I was always trying to get out of those because
yeah.
I wanted to eat by myself. I just wanted to be
Mm,
by myself, but people kept including me.
right.
And again, Brazilians are super sensitive. So I remember the first time I didn't go with them, this woman came up to me and she was like, "Why did you abandon us today?" And I was like, "That is such a strong verb to use. Please don't say that to me. I
Yeah,
just
not to an
didn't go to
HSP.
lunch." Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. But yeah, there was something else I was gonna say and I forgot.
I did want to you have all these experiences and you feel all these things. I was curious, like, I always want to ask people about their coping mechanisms, like day to day. Like, what kind of tools do you use? Is it just kind of running away, headphones?
Hmm.
Do you have any like breathing techniques or whatever? Do you have, what's Andre's kind of like tools that he uses?
Good question. What do I do?
I mean, for most of us, it's headphones, leaving a situation,
I
all the normal
cannot
stuff.
I
Yeah,
cannot not have headphones at all times,
right.
especially riding public transportation or even, when I have to take an Uber, for instance. Um, I always have to have headphones on.
Do you go noise canceling? What do you have any favorite ones?
Not really, just very
Yeah.
basic ones. Those those earphones that go right in your ear with like a
Yeah.
rubber thingy? Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are the
earbuds.
best
Yeah.
ones for me because yeah, because they don't cancel the noise, but they do. Um, I don't know. They do work better. You really can turn off
Yeah.
many sounds.
If you
Many.
have music playing, you don't really necessarily need to pay that $100 for
Yeah,
the noise canceling.
yeah. But working in an office, I have to have music on at all times.
So you are
Uh,
going into an office usually, like unless there's
I
lockdowns
used
and stuff.
to.
Oh,
I've had
okay.
several
Okay.
different jobs, so yeah, I
Right.
would. Even working at the TV station, I had to have my headphones on at most times, and I would always have the excuse like, "Oh yeah, I focus better when I'm listening to music," which is part of it is true,
Right.
but then again, it's mostly due to misophonia. And this is something that I have been experiencing lately. Um, and this is, I don't know, this feels so weird to admit this, but I have been noticing that more and more I've been getting triggered by my own sounds more and more often. So
Oh, yeah,
whenever
let's
I'm
talk about that.
eating, I have to, like, I eat with the TV on
Hmm.
so I cannot hear myself. And
Interesting.
yeah, and sometimes when I do, I don't know, I feel so many things at once, and it's just so frustrating.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, most people, I don't feel like I haven't heard a lot of cases where self-triggering is a huge problem. I think couple people mentioned
Hmm.
that they definitely would notice their own sounds sometimes, but
Hmm.
because one coping mechanism that you hear about is the mimicry, is actually making an exaggerated version of somebody who's triggering you, their of their
I've heard that a
sounds.
lot. I do not relate to that at all.
I don't really relate to that, but it is pretty common.
Yeah,
Definitely common. Yeah.
yeah. But I know in my experience is completely different. Like, no, I have to shelter myself from myself sometimes.
Yeah,
I
that's
do.
interesting. I hope
I
that doesn't get
promise
too
you.
out of control, but
Yeah, I know. I know. I promise you, I have the quietest nose you'll ever find. I do, when I eat, I try to be as quiet
yeah.
as possible so I won't trigger myself, which sounds, and I know how aggressive this is, but I feel crazy, you know? This is how I feel. I feel like I'm like this cannot be this cannot be normal. Logically, rationally, I will go like, oh, of course you're not crazy. You have misophonia, and but how do I feel? I feel crazy. Just as
Interesting.
even more crazy than I don't know if that's something you experienced, but especially growing up when we didn't have this vocabulary, we didn't know what was going on, and I just felt so odd. I don't know if that was your case, but I just felt so out of place all the time, and then I would
Oh
feel
yeah.
crazy. But then, yeah, that's
Well, you feel like I mean, this probably when you're super triggered, it feels like a panic attack, or in your case, it
exactly,
was that vertigo
exactly.
situation. So you completely seize up. There's all kinds of physiological effects, and um, yeah, I mean everything. Your impression of everybody is totally different. Like, and then you come snap out of it, and you're like, oh, everyone's fine. It's just like it's when you're going through when you're going through a massive trigger, like it's like the whole world's against you, and so
Hmm. And then this is something I've been thinking of a lot lately, and I really don't know how to do it, but especially, being in communications, being working with media, um, we have to educate people more about misophonia, and I don't even mean so that people won't trigger those with misophonia, but for those with misophonia to understand what they have, because when I
hmm.
look back, and then again, I know I'm repeating myself, but having misophonia and being a highly sensitive person, um, I I didn't have the proper tools to deal with what I was feeling, and I really put myself in a position to just be so vulnerable to anxiety and so vulnerable to depression and so vulnerable to having panic attacks and to all those things because I didn't know how to relate to my surroundings. I'm still learning, actually. So, I feel like if I could go back, which is such a lame thing to say, but if I could go back and relive some of those moments knowing what I know now, of course I would just behave differently, not in just how, again, like how I would talk to my parents, but how I would talk to myself,
Mm-hmm.
just making sure I knew there was nothing wrong with me. There were things going on with me, but they weren't wrong. They were not mistakes, they were not insanity. They were just the
Right.
way my brain is wired. And yes, it is different. And I am capable of living well with it.
Yeah, many of us are. It's not always easy, but yeah, most of us can make it through it. Just we think about this many times a day.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I guess maybe to wind down, do you it sounds like you've thought about what you wanted to say um today. I was wondering if there's anything else you wanted to tell the audience.
I don't, I feel like I covered everything.
We did cover a lot,
Yeah,
so that's totally fine.
yeah. I didn't really plan what I was going to say. I wanted it to be organic, but
Yeah, that's the
yeah,
best.
I am an overthinker. And I was, the past few days, I was like, okay,
I'm
I
sure you
cannot.
thought about it a little bit. Yeah, I know you. I doubt you have a script, but I'm sure it came up in your mind. So I'm just curious. I wanted to let you, let everything out that.
Yeah, I promised myself I wouldn't write anything down, and I didn't. But yeah, I did think, like the story about like what I lived in school,
Yeah.
and yeah, all of those things. But
Well,
yeah,
this is
I believe
fascinating.
I
Yeah.
I have exhausted all my misophonia related topics.
Yeah, no, it's very good. This is really interesting, and I'm glad we were able to kind of dig into some of how it relates or doesn't relate to HSP. Um, yeah, it's always good to hear people talk about how it relates personally with their family members and friends. It's because it's such an important thing that we all bottle up. And I'm sure most of the listeners have bottled that up growing up. So it's one of
Absolutely,
the
and
many. Yeah. Mhm.
I just want to encourage people to take the highly sensitive person test. It's really, I don't
Yeah.
remember the name of the website, but if you Google highly sensitive person, that will be the first one that comes up. It's the test made by Elaine Aaron. She's amazing. There are so many things with her, like from podcasts to, I don't think she has a podcast, but she's been a guest on several
Yeah.
different podcasts, and there's a lot of hers on YouTube as well. And I encourage everyone to go and research more about it, even if you don't think you're a highly sensitive person. Again, 20% of the population is highly sensitive, so you do know a few people who are highly sensitive.
And you should be
And
sensitive to highly sensitive people.
exactly,
Right.
thank you.
No, that's very good. And I'll try to get the link and stick in the show notes before this goes live. But
Perfect.
it's a great point. Well, Andre, I want to thank you. This has been a great conversation, lively conversation. Very good stuff here. Yeah, thanks again, and good luck with everything. And I hope there's more awareness in Brazil soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for what you've been doing. I know this is what I told you the first time I reached out to you. I know it's not easy to edit podcasts when you have misophonia, so
Right.
I do sympathize a lot with you, and I am very thankful for your work.
Thank you, Andre. This was a fantastic conversation. I hope to hear from more folks in South America. I'd love to have you on the show. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider hitting the 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Otherwise, hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.